folk religion, alongside popular religion and vernacular religion, are terms used within religious studies and folkloristics to describe various forms and expressions of religion that are deemed distinct from the official doctrines and practices of organized religion. The precise definition of folk religion varies among scholars, sometimes also termed popular belief. It consists of ethnic or regional religious customs under the umbrella of a religion, but outside of official doctrine and practices. The term folk religion is generally held to encompass two related but separate subjects. The first is the religious dimension of folk culture, or the folk cultural dimensions of religion. The second refers to the study of syncretisms between two cultures with different stages of formal expression, such as the mélange of African folk beliefs and Roman Catholicism that led to the development of Vodun and Santeria, and similar mixtures of formal religions with folk cultures. Chinese folk religion, folk Christianity, folk Hinduism, and folk Islam are examples of folk religion associated with major religions. The term is also used, especially by the clergy of the faiths involved, to describe the desire of people who otherwise infrequently attend religious worship, do not belong to a church or similar religious society, and who have not made a formal profession of faith in a particular creed, to have religious weddings or funerals, or to have their children baptized. Definition. In the concise Oxford Dictionary of World Religions, John Boker characterized folk religion as either religion which occurs in small, local communities which does not adhere to the norms of large systems, or the appropriation of religious beliefs and practices at a popular level. Don Yoder argued that there were 5 separate ways of defining folk religion. The first was a perspective rooted in a cultural evolutionary framework which understood folk religion as representing the survivals of older forms of religion. In this, it would constitute the survivals, in an official religious context, of beliefs and behavior inherited from earlier stages of the culture's development. This definition would view folk religion in Catholic Europe as the survivals of pre-Christian religion, and the folk religion in Protestant Europe as the survivals of medieval Catholicism. The second definition identified by Yoder was the view that folk religion represented the mixture of an official religion with forms of ethnic religion. This was employed to explain the place of folk religion in the syncretic belief systems of the Americas, where Christianity had blended with the religions of indigenous American and African communities. Yoder's third religion was that often employed within folkloristics, which held that folk religion was the interaction of belief, ritual, custom, and mythology in traditional societies, representing that which was often pejoratively characterized as superstition. The fourth definition provided by Yoder stated that folk religion represented the folk interpretation and expression of religion, noting that this definition would not encompass beliefs that were largely unconnected from organized religion, such as in witchcraft. He therefore altered this definition by including the concept of folk religiosity, thereby defining folk religion as the deposit in culture of folk religiosity, the full range of folk attitudes to religion. His fifth and final definition represented a practical working definition that combined elements from these various other definitions. Thus, he summarized folk religion as the totality of all those views and practices of religion that exist among the people apart from and alongside the strictly theological and liturgical forms of the official religion. Yoder described folk religion as existing in a complex society in relation to and in tension with the organized religion of that society. Its relatively unorganized character differentiates it from organized religion. Alternately, the sociologist of religion Matthias Sich-Varel defined folk religion as the relatively unreflected aspect of ordinary practices and beliefs. that are oriented towards, or productive of, something beyond the immediate here and now, everyday transcendence. Historical development. In Europe, the study of folk religion emerged from the study of religiös Volkskunde, a German term which was used in reference to the religious dimension of folk culture, or the folk cultural dimension of religion. This term was first employed by a German Lutheran preacher, Paul Droz, in a 1901 article that he published which was titled Religiös Volkskunde, eine Aufgabe der Practices Theologie. This article was designed to be read by young Lutheran preachers leaving the seminary, to equip them for the popular variants of Lutheranism that they would encounter among the congregations and which would differ from the official, doctrinal Lutheranism that they had been accustomed to. Although developing within a religious environment, the term came to be adopted by German academics in the field of folkloristics. During the 1920s and 1930s, theoretical studies of religiös Volkskunde had been produced by the folklorist Joseph Weigert, Werner Boet, and Max Rumpf, all of whom had focused on religiosity within German peasant communities. Over the coming decades, Georg Schreiber established an institute for religiös Volkskunde in Munich, while a similar department was established in Salzburg by Hans Koren. Other prominent academics involved in the study of the phenomenon were Heinrich Schauert and Rudolf Kriss, the latter of whom collected one of the largest collections of folk religious art and material culture in Europe, later housed in Munich's Bayerisches National Museum. Throughout the 20th century, many studies were made of folk religion in Europe, paying particular attention to such subjects as pilgrimage and the use of shrines. In the Americas, the study of folk religion developed among cultural anthropologists studying the syncretistic cultures of the Caribbean and Latin America. The pioneer in this field was Redfield, whose 1930 book Tepoztlan, a Mexican village, contrasted and examined the relationship between folk religion and official religion in a peasant community. Yoder later noted that although the earliest known usage of the term folk religion in the English language was unknown, it probably developed as a translation of the German Volksreligion. One of the earliest prominent usages of the term was in the title of Joshua Trachtenberg's 1939 work Jewish Magic and Superstition, a study in folk religion. The term also gained increasing usage within the academic field of comparative religion, appearing in the titles of Ishiro Hori's Folk Religion in Japan, Martin Nilsson's Greek Folk Religion, and Charles Leslie's Reader, The Anthropology of Folk Religion. Courses on the study of folk religion came to be taught at various universities in the United States, such as John Messenger's at Indiana University and Don Yoder's at the University of Pennsylvania. Although the subject of folk religion fell within the remit of scholars operating in both folkloristics and religious studies, by 1974 Yoder noted that US-based academics in the latter continued to largely ignore it, instead focusing on the study of theology and institutionalized religion. He contrasted this with the situation in Europe, where historians of religion had devoted much time to studying folk religiosity. He also lamented that many US-based folklorists also neglected the subject of religion because it did not fit within the standard genre-based system for cataloging folklore. The term folk religion came to be increasingly rejected in the 1990s and 2000s by scholars seeking more precise terminology. Problems and critique. Yoder noted that one problem with the use of the term folk religion was that it did not fit into the work of those scholars who used the term religion in reference solely to organized religion. He highlighted the example of the prominent sociologist of religion Emil Durkheim, who insisted that religion was organized in order to contrast it with magic. Yoda noted that scholars adopting these perspectives often preferred the term folk belief over folk religion. A second problem with the use of folk religion that Yoda highlighted was that some scholars, particularly those operating in the sociology of religion, used the term as a synonym for ethnic religion, meaning a religion closely tied to a particular ethnic or national group, and is thus contrasted with their universal religion, which cuts across ethnic and national boundaries. Among the scholars to have adopted this use of terminology are E. Wilbur Bott. The folklorist Leonard Norman Primiano argued that the use of folk religion, as well as related terms like popular religion and unofficial religion, by scholars, does an extreme disservice to the forms of religiosity that scholarship is examining, because, in his opinion, such terms are residualistic, derogatory. He argued that using such terminology implies that there is a pure element to religion, which is in some way transformed, even contaminated, by its exposure to human communities. As a corrective, he suggested that scholars used vernacular religion as an alternative. Defining this term, Primiano stated that vernacular religion, bullshit by definition, religion as it is lived, is human beings encounter, understand, interpret, and practice it. Since religion inherently involves interpretation, it is impossible for the religion of an individual not to be vernacular. Carpalo was critical of this approach, deeming it mistaken, and arguing that switching from folk religion to vernacular religion results in the scholar picking up a different selection of things from the world. He cautioned that both terms were ideological and semantic load, and warned scholars to pay attention to the associations that each word had. Chinese folk religion. Chinese folk religion or Shennism are labels used to describe the collection of ethnic religious traditions which have historically comprised the predominant belief system in China and among Han Chinese ethnic groups up to the present day. Shennism describes Chinese mythology and includes the worship of Shen, which can be nature deities, ties, clan deities, city gods, national deities, culture or heroes and demigods, dragons and ancestors. Shennism, as a term, was first published by Adair Elliott in 1955. Chinese folk religion is sometimes categorized with Taoism, since over the centuries institutional Taoism has been attempting to assimilate or administrate local religions. More accurately, Taoism can be defined as a branch of Shennism, since it sprang out of folk religion and Chinese philosophy. Chinese folk religion is sometimes seen as a constituent part of Chinese traditional religion, but more often, the two are regarded as synonymous. With around 454 million adherents, or about 6.6% of the world population, Chinese folk religion is one of the major religious traditions in the world. In China, more than 30% of the population adheres to Shennism or Taoism, despite being heavily suppressed during the last 2 centuries, from the Taiping Rebellion to the Cultural Revolution. It is currently experiencing a modern revival in both mainland China and Taiwan. Various forms have received support by the government of the People's Republic of China, such as Misuism in southern China, Zhuangdi worship, Black Dragon worship in Shaanxi, and Aishen worship. Folk Christianity. Folk Christianity is defined differently by various scholars. Definitions include the Christianity practiced by a conquered people, Christianity as most people live it, a term used to overcome the division of beliefs into orthodox and unorthodox. Christianity is impacted by superstition as practiced by certain geographical Christian groups, and Christianity defined in cultural terms without reference to the theologies and histories. Folk Islam. Folk Islam is an umbrella term used to collectively describe forms of Islam that incorporate native folk beliefs and practices. Folk Islam has been described as the Islam of the urban poor, country people and tribes. In contrast to Orthodox or High Islam, Sufism and Sufi concepts are often integrated into folk Islam. Various practices and beliefs have been identified with the concept of folk Islam. They include the following: belief in traditional magic systems and ecstatic rituals, the use of shrines and amulets, veneration of saints, incorporation of animistic beliefs. Folk Hinduism. The Hindu epics and Puranas have contributed to the foundation of folk Hinduism. Folk Hinduism also includes the native Dravidian religion, Sanamarism, Baithoism, etc. But today, folk Hinduism may still be distinguished from higher forms of Hindu philosophy, or mystical or ascetic forms. Folk Judaism. In one of the first major academic works on the subject, titled Jewish Magic and Superstition, a study in folk religion, Joshua Trachtenberg provided a definition of Jewish folk religion as consisting of ideas and practices that, whilst not meeting with the approval of religious leaders, enjoyed wide popularity such that they must be included in what he termed the field of religion. This included beliefs in demons, angels and magical practices. Later studies have emphasized the significance of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem to the many Jewish folk customs linked to mourning and, in particular, to the belief in Hibbot HaKevra, belief that the dead are tortured in the grave for 3 days after burial by demons until they remember their names. This idea began with early eschatological Agatha and was then further developed by the Kabbalists. Raphael Partai has been acknowledged as one of the first to utilize anthropology to study Jewish folk religion. In particular, he has drawn attention to the important role of the female divine element, which he sees in the goddess Asherah, the Shekinah, the Matronot, and Lilith. Writer Stephen Sharrow has stated that Jewish popular religion, in common with other forms of folk religion, has a focus on the magical, or thaumaturgical, i.e., it is used to assist in protecting the individual from sickness and misfortune. He emphasizes that while rabbinical Judaism dealt with Jewish ritual and halakha, magicians helped people in everyday life. He points to the example of a relatively professionalized type of magician being the Baal Shem of Poland, who beginning in the 16th century thrived with the popularity of practical Kabbalah in the 18th century. These Baal Shem promised to use the knowledge of the names of God and the angels, along with exorcism, chiromancy, and herbal medicine to bring harm to enemies, and success in areas of social life such as marriage and childbirth. Charles Liebman has written that the essence of the folk religion of American Jews is the social ties to one another, illustrated by the finding that religious practices that would prevent social integration, such as a stricter interpretation of dietary laws and the Sabbath, have been abandoned, whilst the few practices that have followed, such as the Passover Seder, social rites of passage, and the high holy days, are ones that strengthen Jewish family and community integration. Liebman described the rituals and beliefs of contemporary Jewish folk religion in his works, The Ambivalent American Jew and American Jewry, Identity and Affiliation. In sociology, folk religion is often contrasted with elite religion. Folk religion is defined as the beliefs, practices, rituals and symbols originating from sources other than the religion's leadership. Folk religion in many instances is tolerated by the religion's leadership, although they may consider it an error. A similar concept is lived religion, the study of religion as practiced by believers.